Hello everyone, welcome to episode 4 of Ghost Variations. I'm Jessica Duchen, this is my study, this is my book. In yesterday's episode, Yeli Darani and her assistant Anna Robertson went out for dinner to escape the news that Yeli's very dear friend Tom Spring Rice is basically not going to live very long. In today's episode, Yeli and Anna are about to get the frights of their life. The house in Netherton Grove lay quiet, the daffodils in the front garden glimmering in the moonlight. "Come in and have some coffee," Yeli suggested. "It's quite late, are you sure?" Anna glanced at her watch. "Of course, and I'll send you home in a cab later, whenever you like." "Maybe a quick cup." Anna smiled and followed Yeli inside. Upstairs, Adrienne was asleep, and from the big bedroom, Yeli could hear the soft snoring of her brother-in-law. Yeli and Anna settled in the drawing room with a pot of coffee and some delicate porcelain cups that had belonged to Yeli's mother. The piano was closed, and on a side table stood a bouquet of tiger lilies, a trophy from Adila's latest concert, spicing the wooden floor with crimson pollen. "I miss my mother so much." Yeli filled Anna's cup. "She always knew the best thing to say and do. They say only the good die young. Do you sometimes feel that everyone has gone?" "I can see how you would," Anna admitted. "Your mother and father and Sepp and—" The prospect of Tom joining this list cut through Yeli. She could cancel everything and go to him now, perhaps marry him, even though it was too late to build a life together. Or she could accept his exhortations to stay away and concentrate on her music. If only there were wise words to be found. If only she had known where she really stood with Sepp before he'd been killed. "You know, I was thinking—" "What, Yeli?" "Don't laugh, but we could try the glass game." Anna recoiled a little. "You want to do that? Are you sure?" "Perhaps there'd be advice. Even my mother." She tried to smile, to hide the pain she experienced at the notion of her beloved Mama trying to reach her through a moving tumbler, or Sepp doing so. Tom's words expanded in her mind. Be true to yourself, true to your vocation. Glass games were not true to anything Yeli held dear, but Adila made it look so easy. "I didn't think you believed in it," said Anna. "I don't." Yeli gave a laugh. "It's just a distraction. Perhaps we'll ask questions only for you. About the nice young man you mentioned the other day." Anna nodded, her expression unreadable. Yeli fetched from Adila's bureau a set of small letter cards, which they used for word games, and laid them out alphabetically in a circle on the dining room table. In the centre, she set in place an upended tumbler. A scratch and whine at the door revealed Caesar, who should have been in his basket by the back door, but had begun to hanker for company on hearing their voices. She let him in. He lay across her feet and thumped his tail before going to sleep, nose on paws. Next, she scrawled yes, no, and goodbye on pieces of paper ripped from a notebook, barely legible in her strange wide-lettered writing. As a child in Hungary, she had gone to school for only 8 days. Each time she'd cried so much that eventually her mother could stand it no longer and kept her home. After that, Yeli played the violin to her heart's content. They lit a sole candle. The rest of the room disappeared into the night, while an island of creamy gold highlighted the walls and the wooden surface. Now this seemed a cavern fit for otherworldly activities. The two women sat opposite one another, exchanging smiles to conceal their nerves. "Ready, darling?" Yeli said, to reassure herself as much as Anna. "So, let's sit quietly and clear our minds." They waited. each with one finger on the glass, silent, focusing. The candle flame flickered in Yeli's exhalations. "Do we need to invoke something?" Anna whispered. Yeli thought of Mary Southern's opening invitation. "Hello, is there anyone of friendly intent who would like to talk to us?" 20 seconds more went by in stillness. Perhaps it wasn't going to work. Then, beneath her fingertip, Yeli felt a slip of energy, like the prickle of an electric current. The glass gave an unmistakable shift. Yeli and Anna breathed and waited. It moved first left, then right, and was still. Anna took a deep breath. "Is Mrs. Antoinette Staragni there, please? Darling, don't ask for my mama. It's not a telephone." Yeli was becoming aware of heat gathering in the centre of her palms, a concentration of some intensity. First a superficial tingling, then gradually digging deeper and deeper. Soon her hand seemed to be pierced through with 1,000 pins, and around the central spots numbness began to spread through her fingers and the muscles at the side of her palms. Before she could say anything, let alone make a break for safety, the glass started to glide along the table. It circled the letters once, twice, and yet again, then swerved towards the G and on to its next choice, apparently galvanised by a propulsive force that Yeli knew was not hers, and to judge from Anna's frightened eyes, could scarcely belong to her either. Anna, left forefinger on the tumbler, noted down letter after letter. Yeli, transfixed, was wondering what was happening to her hands. Wasn't this occurred when someone received stigmata? Yet there was no sign of blood, only the bizarre impression that someone had plugged electrodes into her palms. In due course, they derived from the glass one simple phrase, "Glad to see you," which was almost the same as the Eastbourne incident. "Is that Yeli's mother?" The glass slid towards no. Then, before either of them could ask a question, it plunged onwards letter by agonising letter, forcing their concentration. Anna noted down the sequence. "This is a little strange." The glass slowed and ceased its motion, leaving them to read back the transcript. Once, twice, 5 times. "No!" Yeli stared into Anna's eyes, feeling winded. "I'm not seeing things," Anna said. "Are you reading this the same way?" "Does it say what it seems to?" The closest approximation to the letters seemed to be, "A composer seeks your aid." Anna was moistening her lips. Yeli reached out to give her hand a reassuring press and found it chilly with fright. Part of her wanted to switch on the light and declare all of this, in best Donald Tovey fashion, nuffin stonsence. Could the composer perhaps be Sepp Kelly? The pressure in her palms was becoming almost painful. She thought she could make out, in the candlelight, a pink spot in the centre of her free hand, as if she had held it over a flame for a moment too long. She heard herself speaking, doing the one thing she had intended not to do, asking questions that were not for Anna. "Please, in what way does this composer seek my aid?" The glass began to move even faster, as it might for Adila. It was many long minutes before it finally came to rest. "He left the earth before you were born," Anna read out. "He would like you to find a piece and play it. It has not been played for many years." They looked at each other in fear and wonder. "This is crazy," said Yeli. "It talks in sentences." "I want to stop," said Anna. "It's too strange. Please, Yeli, can't we put the light on now?" "Just 1 minute more. I've got to know who this is," Yeli pleaded. Clearly it was not Sepp. She didn't know whether to be sorry or thankful. "Perhaps it's Uncle Yo." Adila was one of the last pupils of their great-uncle, Joseph Joachim. whom they and many others had called Onkel Jo, the violinist who had been a close friend of Johannes Brahms and of Robert and Clara Schumann. Joachim's playing and teaching had shaped generations of musicians. He was a celebrated performer and strict, demanding instructor who had died when Yeli was 14. And if it is, who could the composer be? For Uncle Jo, surely Brahms! They waited, fingertips poised on the glass. After a lengthy pause, it drifted through a golden patch of light towards the R. The name built slowly, letter by letter. In front of their eyes, 2 words were forming. Robert Schumann. Yeli felt as if she had fallen headfirst into the sea and was trying to pull herself out, feet and hands slipping in all directions. This couldn't be real. Concerto, spelt the glass, a step at a time. D minor. Yeli, Anna said, you're playing a practical joke on me. But no, you are playing one on me. The motion under their fingers continued. Maybe museum, the transcript read. I'm scared, Anna pleaded. Aren't you? Yeli was experiencing an inner clash of titans. A thick-skulled ogre of scepticism, aided by a Himalayan yeti of fear, was wrestling against her musical self, which at the notion of an unknown violin concerto by Schumann had sparked into a burgeoning inferno of curiosity. This couldn't be real, but what if it were? What would the piece be like? She had to know more. Hello, she burst out. Are you still there? Is it this concerto? Is it any good? What a question to ask a spirit messenger. It wouldn't reply to such insolence. But that inexorable motion was beginning again. The letters kept flowing as if pouring out of the glass, as if the visiting spirit, now that it had acquired this peculiar access to life, was determined not to relinquish it. It is not my best work, Anna read out the transcript, but it is much better than certain music being written today. She shoved back her chair, clattered her feet and plunged for the nearest lamp. Yeli, no! Help! That was Schumann! That was Schumann himself! I can't do this. We have to stop. I've never been so terrified in all my life. It's all right. Yeli's whole body felt icy, except for the heat in her palms, as if all her blood had rushed to them and formed whirlpools there. Electric light swamped the candle. The spell cracked and fell away. In the brightness they blinked, steadied their breathing and clasped hands. Yeli's head had begun to throb with exhaustion. They sat without speaking, trying to absorb at least some small measure of what had just happened to them. Why Schumann? Anna ventured. Why would it be him? Yeli racked her reeling mind for any possible explanation. He was a great friend of Uncle Jo. Actually, I think it was Uncle Jo who introduced him to Brahms. Schumann was much older, wasn't he? Yes, Schumann would have been in his 40s. Jo and Brahms were both in their early 20s, and they both adored him. Don't you love his music? I remember Myra Hess playing the piano concerto. My hands hurt from clapping. It was so wonderful. So if there is a violin concerto, that would be really important, wouldn't it? I suppose it depends on the piece, but if it's as beautiful as the piano concerto, it's almost unimaginable. You know how often I play the Brahms and Mendelssohn concertos. It could be as significant as those. It could transform the whole violin concerto repertoire. It could transform concert life, or certainly it could transform mine, she reflected, if I found it. Wasn't there some appalling tragedy around Schumann? I can't remember what happened. He became very ill, perhaps with manic depression. Eventually, he lost his mind and he died in a mental asylum. Donald Tovey still winces when he talks about it. He went mad. Did that affect his music at all? That, said Yeli, is a good question. I'm not sure anyone really knows the answer. Many questions hung in the air, most of them unasked. After Anna had gone home in a cab, Yeli sat at the table staring at the letters, the tumbler, and the transcript lying where they'd left them. Her hands had cooled, her head cleared. What idiocy was this? She hadn't pushed the glass. Anna was so frightened that she couldn't have done so either. There had to be a rational explanation. If this piece of insanity was to be believed, she had received a message from the spirit of Robert Schumann, or his representative, telling her that a violin concerto he had written was lying unplayed somewhere and he wanted her to save it. Astonishing, an extraordinary demand, an overwhelming responsibility that Schumann should choose her. But supposing it was a trick of some kind, a deception, or worse, if something truly supernatural had taken place, how could she be sure this communication was benevolent and not demoniac? She could wait for Adela to come home, then tell her everything, or she could clear away the evidence and pretend nothing had ever happened. It had to be nonsense. The very idea of a concerto by Schumann having lain untouched all these years was ridiculous. If such a thing existed, assuredly every violinist in the world would want to play it. Besides, she'd lose face if she admitted that she had been indulging in the glass game, since she habitually poured scorn on Adela and Eric for it. Yeli read back the transcript one last time, then took it upstairs to stow at the bottom of a drawer in Anna's desk, in case it might someday come in handy. She'd leave it there, forget about it, and tell her sister nothing ever. But while the clock ticked, while Alec and Adrienne slumbered oblivious in their bedrooms and Caesar downstairs gave canine snores in his basket, and while around 3 a.m. the engine and brakes of a cab signalled that Adela was home, Yeli lay awake, still electrified. If Uncle Jo and his friend Robert Schumann could be there communicating, then so could Bach and Beethoven, so could Shakespeare, Plato, Aristophanes, so could Napoleon and the Duke of Wellington, so could her mother and Sepp. And supposing she ignored the messages, dismissing them as the product of her own wishful thinking, and then the work turned out to be real after all. Supposing she were to find and perform it, supposing she could free it, save it from oblivion and infuse it with renewed life. She heard Adela moving about in the bathroom, humming to herself as she shed her evening dress and jewels. The tune was from Schumann's Violin Sonata in D minor. Still wondering, Yeli let herself fall into an uneasy sleep. That's the end of today's episode. Come back tomorrow for the beginning of chapter 3. Thank you. Bye-bye.